Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a very good day everyone. So this week we will be looking at the aspect of web development. So we have basically covered all the multimedia elements which are essential in developing a website. So today we'll be looking at some of the theoretical aspects of developing a website and also what is needed for you to develop your website. Now, a website is a collection of web pages, images, videos, or other digital assets that is hosted on one or more web servers, usually accessible via the internet. A web page, on the other hand, is basically a document typically written in HTML format, and that is almost always accessible via HTTP. That is a protocol that transfers information from the web server to display in the user's web browser. So basically, this is the difference between a website and a web page. If you have in mind that a web page is basically the coding and the programming in written format or in HTML format, yes, you're on the right track. Do you need to know in details on this? Well, if you want to go further and if you wish to explore on how to develop a website at this level, by all means. But if you are asking whether this is covered in our syllabus, I just have to say no, because basically we are going to use third-party website developer in order for you to develop a website for this project. I mean, for your final project. So basically, you can read the rest. It talks about how a website functions and so on. Yeah. Now, there are two types of website. One is static and the other one is dynamic. Now, a static website is basically something that we put on. It does not move, it does not change, it does not have hyperlink. Even if it does, it will just move to another page in a static motion, in a static mode. Okay, the reason why it is static sometimes because certain websites are developed just to announce they are trying to make it less complicated because they are trying to reach every level of people. So, for example, if let's say there's a lockdown, given the recent circumstance or situation, there's a lockdown because we are not actually experiencing lockdown in Malaysia. What we are actually having right now is basically a restricted movement order, yeah, or it's basically you can go, you can still go out, but it's just that they have few rules that you have to adhere. But in contrast, a lockdown disallows any of us to go out. We just have to stay inside, and there will be like people from the government, maybe the army or the police that will come to us bringing in food and other necessary goods during the lockdown. So just imagine that if the government needs to reach out to these people, even up to a point, people living in the rural areas, they don't want to make it too complicated. So most of these websites are developed in static mode because they have one intention, that is to display something that is straightforward, something that is clear so that everyone understands. And we also have the second type of a website that is a dynamic. A dynamic website basically includes movements, basically includes animations and a lot of other things, and they integrate all the multimedia elements. Number one is to make the website interesting, despite the fact that the website functions to disseminate information, to transfer knowledge. They want it to make it interesting. They want it to make the website catchy. They will also want to make the websites to be uh, appealing to the viewers. So we have also another type which is called portals. So portals are basically pages intended to serve as main pages or gateway for specific topics or ideas. We have also a website or a wiki website which allows people to collaborate online and write content together. I guess the best example for wiki website is Wikipedia itself, and that is why often I inform my students especially my FYP students, that it is less reliable for a person to use Wikipedia as your main source for your research, for your academic writing, etc. Because this website allows you to make amendments publicly. That means anyone across the world can just make the changes. Now, other than Wikipedia, if you notice clearly, Google Translate or Google Translator basically functions the same, to which you can suggest or to which you can amend the meaning of certain words, because they don't really have people who are actually, or perhaps they don't have like a committee to actually look into this. So their source of, or the main source that they have with them is basically what is uploaded on the server of Google server, as well as input that they receive from the people or from the public. We also have e-commerce, all right, like me banking to you, CIMB clicks, etc. Okay, and not only that, if you were to talk about like PayPal, that can also be considered as e-commerce website. Blog, I guess blog was an it thing before, before people start to use social media, as a way for them to, capture day-to-day moments, but before this, and Blogspot was a hit back then. But of course, now we have so many other blog style websites, a website that can function as a website and as a blog at the same time. Social media, all right, like Facebook, so on. But some of the social media site, for example, Instagram, is only applicable on a website. However, to for it to function properly, you have to download the mobile apps. Unlike Facebook, which functions on a website as well as on a mobile app, but not so much for Instagram. Twitter, basically the same with Facebook and some other things, yeah, like Snapchat. And of course, we have LMS and CMS. So LMS is a learning management system. Best example that I can share with you is Island itself, our very own LMS. And other than that, we also have some other LMS. Google Classroom, now that everyone is into this, can also be considered as an LMS. CMS is basically content management system where you upload your e-content and it stores there, and so that you can view your e-content. Most of LMS, they functions as CMS. I guess every LMS has CMS in it, but not necessarily a CMS is an LMS. Do you get it? So basically, LMS is the biggest set, CMS is the subset of LMS. Just because your website functions as CMS, not necessarily your website can be an LMS. But if your website is an LMS, surely, because you need a content management system, because you need to put up your content so that students or people who want to learn on a course, they can just refer to your e-content. An example for CMS, we used to have open learning platform before. UITM has its own, but I cannot remember. But when it coming back to LMS, the latest LMS developed by UITM that actually integrates both LMSs previously, like Island and iClass. So they are now called UFuture. And we have portfolios, all right, online portfolios. All right, I guess I do not need to explain in details about types of web browsers, yeah? So we use Chrome, we have Opera, Safari, Firefox, Internet Explorer. Most commonly used by people, either Chrome or Firefox. for Windows version and for the Mac version Safari. So here are few free website builders, that you can actually use and utilize in developing your website. We have Wix, Webflow, Webnode, Weebly, Wix. They are most common website builders until the end. However, for the purpose of this program and also this semester, I will be coming up with a tutorial video on how to actually develop a website using Google Sites. And the video will be available inshallah beginning next week. I will upload it on YouTube and you can refer to my tutorial videos, and maybe you, because I'm the rest they are ready-made templates to which you just need to include in your information, and then you can have your own website. Google Sites, you still need to, they have templates but very basic, but still Google site does not involve in the use of coding or programming for that matter, yeah. But the reason why I would like to explore on Google Sites, because it's free. Let us talk about site mapping. Now, site mapping is one of the key component for your website portfolio. If you refer back to the notes or the briefing that I've given to you before on your website group project, one of the things that you need to include in your portfolio is a site mapping. Now, let us look at what is basically a site mapping. Now, a sitemap is a list or a diagram which represents the hierarchical structure of the HTML pages in the website. So basically, it tells me what do you plan to have in your website. So a sitemap is a website design planning tool. It is used to map out the site architecture, the structure, the navigation, the page hierarchy, so on and so forth. So this is a sitemap outline in a form of HTML version. This is the horizontal tree diagram. This is the vertical tree diagram. Okay. So this is another example on how to develop your so-called sitemap for your web page. And I would like you to basically use, because there is no exact format or template, but this example can actually be used or be referred to in order for you to develop your site mapping for your website group project. Okay, because why I need to understand, and you also need to know, the thing is, because whenever you do um, a clear and well-structured site mapping, it helps you, especially when it comes to navigation. I guess, in general, you can have whatever you want to have in your website. I don't think you need to have a site mapping. But when it comes to navigation, it can be quite complicated, because whatever you have in your mind, they just stay in mind. But if you present the content in a form of site mapping, it helps you to understand, okay, right after 1.0 about us, what do I want to have? Company background, biographies, contact. I'm referring to this example here. So imagine once you have developed the tab or the sub content of about us, and that is company background. So when it comes to navigation, you may want to develop, you may want to come up with a button that brings you back to about us, or perhaps that brings you back to home page. But normally we'll try to bring back to about us, because you want to navigate, you want to direct your audience back to about us, so that that person can go to 1.2 and 1.3. Can you see? So navigation is very essential in developing a website, and in order for you to navigate correctly, because this will be part of the rubrics and assessment, you need to have a site mapping. But by just having site mapping for you to illustrate your content, I think you don't even need a site mapping. You can just, roughly sketch what you want to have in your website. But why do we still need site mapping? Is for navigation purpose, so that you are on the right track. When you have the back button, when you have the home page button, you know that it brings it back to which page. Okay, so that is why you need to have a clear and well structured site mapping for your website. Okay, so another example here, but of course we're not going to use HTML coding or writing. We are just going to use a simple diagram so that it helps me to understand better on how you plan out your website. So a few things that you need to help to determine your sitemap, like your purpose, goals, audience, user profiles, content of the page, of course, as I mentioned, plan your structure and navigation. Okay, so plan your sitemap. How to plan? Either you use by hand, that is you sketch, or sticky notes, or you can use if you're using an A4 paper or blank papers, you can just draw it, your so-called site mapping. But I guess since we have Microsoft Word and other softwares that can be actually be used for you to develop your site mapping. Okay, that would be the use of software tools. Yeah, you can explore this, but I'm not saying that it is compulsory. As long as when you present your portfolio, there is a site mapping in it. Simple as that. Okay, so creating a sitemap, examples of symbols, boxes, and arrows. So static page, kalau if let's say you want to refer to dynamic page, feature page, page cluster, uh, you know, uh, uh, wireframe, homepage. There's a lot of ways for you to explore, especially when it comes to symbols. But for the purpose of EIC 552, let us not use the symbols because I fear that the symbols may not be standardized. Since we are at the learning stage and let us go back to the purpose of the website development, and that is for me just to understand the concept and also to look at your navigation of your website. I think as simple as possible, that is advisable for your site mapping. So applying principles of tech and user documentation, I guess you can just read and try to understand this. So the big picture, yeah, for the sitemap to be useful to my audience, the diagram must communicate the big picture of the website to stakeholders while providing enough detail to be useful for the development team. So imagine, yeah, if you are going to develop a website, there are two kind of people that will be trying to understand your site mapping. The first one is your stakeholders, your head of departments, board of directors. That is why when you develop a site mapping, always have in mind you're going to use that site mapping to explain to them. So if your site mapping, as much as it illustrates what you want to transpire in your website, but it's a bit of work for these people to understand, therefore your site mapping is ineffective. And likewise, the second group of people that will be looking at your site mapping would be the developer himself or herself. If we are talking about developing a website using a programmer or a coder. So this group of people still, well, if you call them IT people, they need to understand as well on how you want to plan out the website. So imagine having these two to understand the structure, the content, the navigation of your website by just looking at your site mapping. And that is why site mapping, or as much as you feel that, oh, this is something simple, it's just, telling people what we want to have. But if it is ineffective, there will be like some sort of a series of communication breakdowns, and that is not good. Or misinterpretation. Okay, so be extra careful. You still need to put all your heads together in brainstorming and coming up with a good site mapping. And there will be like a series of consultation, inshallah, before you finally present your final product of your website. And along the way, you can always ask me whether or not your site mapping is the right thing, you're doing the right thing, or perhaps you need to make changes. Yeah. Okay.